because the financial rewards in the information technology industry are so great that it is tempting to believe that industry must have been responsible for most of the fundamental innovations and can be relied upon in the future.
This session shall be led by eminent dignitaries from the area of information technology. It is indeed a pleasure to have amongst us a unique personality, Dr. Achyut Godbole sir, Managing Director, Soft Excel Consultancy Services, Mumbai. Sir is a chemical engineer from IIT Mumbai. Sir has 32 years of experience in the software companies in India, UK and USA. Sir has contributed to the multi-fold growth of companies such as Patni, Sintel, L&T Infotech, Apar and Disha while working at the highest levels. Sir has written books on operating systems, data communications and networks, web technologies and demystifying computers. Currently, Sir is the Managing Director of Soft Excel Consultancy Services. I now request Dr. Arun English Sir, Director IBMRD'S, to felicitate our keynote speaker, Dr. Achyut Godbole Sir.
Well, I was going to say distinguished eyes, but eyes have moved. So, good evening, friends. First of all, I must thank IBMRD to have invited me here to talk to all of you about information technology yesterday, today, and tomorrow. I think there's a purpose behind this talk. Today we are going through a very tumultuous period. There's a slowdown in the economy and IT jobs are becoming rarer. Recruitments are becoming less and less, and there is some kind of anxiety amongst the students in terms of the job opportunities that await all of you after you pass out. And I think it's important for us to understand how we developed as a country, as India, how we got where we are today, what's likely to happen tomorrow, and what should we do to succeed in tomorrow's world. And I think that's what I will end my talk with. The total time that I intend taking is approximately an hour or so. Luckily my throat isn't doing too well, so I won't bother you for too long a time. So, you may have to bear with me for an hour or so. When we talk about information technology, I think let me begin with the history of the universe. And you might wonder why I'm doing so. But you'll quickly realize the reasons why I'm doing so. The universe was created around 14 billion years ago. The earth was created around 4.5 billion years ago, and the first living being came to existence 3.75 billion years ago. Then there was evolution, and finally mankind arrived on the earth. The history of mankind, or the look-alike of mankind, spans over 4.5 million years, which is 45 lakh years. And the actual history of mankind is around 1 lakh years, 100,000 years. Alvin Toffler divides the history of human beings into 3 epochs. One is agriculture, second is industry, and third is services. As we know, even in any nation's GDP, there are 3 parts. One is agriculture, second is industry, and third is services. Agriculture spanned for tens of thousands of years, but there was hardly any progress in terms of technology. The way we lived yesterday was the same way that we live today, and the same way that we would live tomorrow. and the weeks and months and years and centuries and so on and so forth. Life hardly changed because there was hardly any technology. So for tens of thousands of years, in the epoch of agriculture, there was very little technological progress. Then followed industrial revolution, and only in a few centuries the kind of progress that we made was far, far higher than the progress that we made in tens of thousands of years. I am talking about technological progress. And then what followed was services, which came of age around 1960. You might argue that the first bank came into existence in Italy in 1342 or whatever. So in a sense, services had started long back. But services as an advanced, as modern services came into existence or came of age after 1960 with the help of information technology. IT being a prominent part of services industry. And then only in a few decades of services epoch, the kind of progress that we have made, technological progress, is much higher than the progress that we have made in a few centuries of industry, which in turn is much, much higher than the progress that we made in tens of thousands of years of agriculture. The reason why I am saying this is that if you plot a graph, or all of you must have done engineering, I hope, I guess, the rate of growth is not linear, it is exponential. So in tens of thousands of years, the progress that we made was much less than the progress that we made, and by many folds, than the progress that we made in a few centuries, which in turn was far, far less than the progress that we made in the last few decades. In fact, the technological progress that mankind has made in the last 10 years is in fact much higher than the progress that we have made in the entire history of mankind. I mean, this is really amazing. Because it's really cumulative, as you must have known. As Newton used to say, I was standing on the shoulders of my predecessors. So it's cumulative. So that's the way things are moving. In IIT, we had a rack full of books on futurism as to what's likely to happen in future. Today, very few people actually venture to talk about what's likely to happen in future, because when they predict that something will happen by such and such day, things would have happened much earlier than what they had predicted. And this has happened many times. 15 years back, 10 years back, 20 years back, when I used to talk about future of technology, I used to talk about flying cars, for instance. And people used to look at me with disbelief, complete disbelief. How can a car fly? Where is a runaway for a car? I mean, Amarnagar, every car starts taking a runaway and then fly. I mean, what would the traffic look like? It's impossible. But then helicopters don't need a runaway. They can just fly from where they are. So why can't a car fly? I mean, I have 5-6 books on flying car technology. The research has been going on for many years and decades. But today, only a few months back, a flying car was unveiled in New York. I mean, the price is a few crore rupees that are apart. But a flying car exists today. So it's no more a dream. It's no more unreal or imaginary or the science fiction stuff. I mean, it's actually, it exists today in reality. So things which we thought at one time would never exist have already existed much earlier, much before the time that we thought they would exist. I think that's the kind of place with which technology is moving. And it has implications, and I will come to implications and obsolescence and the way we need to adapt to the changes towards the end of my speech. But if we now decode the services decades, then we look at 5 major decades. One is 1960s. As far as information technology is concerned, 1960s was the mainframes decade, 1970s was a mini computer decade, 1980s was a personal computer, PCs decade, 1990s was internet, and 2000 onwards was BPO, call centers, and many allied industries which came into existence. I will discuss about all these decades one by one. Each decade will be 2-3 minutes, but I will stay on the decade of 1980s for a little longer, maybe 7-8 minutes, maybe 10. The reason being is that it's only because of the decade of 1980s that you all are sitting here. And we all are talking about information technology. I don't believe India is an IT superpower, but whatever it is worth, when we talk about at least the progress that we have made in information technology, it's only because of what happened in the decade of 1980s. And it's very important for us to understand what happened in the decade of 1980s. If we have to really grasp the essence of information technology and its progress and what's likely to happen in tomorrow's world. In 1960s, there were mainframes, they were very large, they were not easy to use. People used to use punch cards, there was batch processing, they were not user friendly, there were no colors, there was no multimedia, there was no GUI, graphical user interface. Human beings have been communicating with from age-old times in 4 different types of media, as we know. One is text, where you press a key on a word processor, the character is stored on a disk in terms of zeros and ones. Then still photograph. When you click a photograph on a digital camera, the photograph is converted into zeros and ones and stored on the computer disk. Then sound, any music or any speech or whatever, when you play a CD, MP3 CD, whatever, CD means it is converted into zeros and ones and stored in the computer, or you cut a CD. And DVD, which is still, which is moving pictures or video. These are the 4 formats. When you play a DVD, essentially a moving picture or video is converted into zeros and ones. Now, all these 4 formats can be converted into zeros and ones, can be stored in the computer, can be printed, can be deleted, can be manipulated, can be transmitted. That's what is called multimedia. The transmission rates are different, which is why you need multimedia operating systems and so on. My latest edition of operating systems is a full chapter of multimedia operating systems and how the operating system deals with variety of issues emanating from not just speed or speeds of transmission, but variety of other issues. But there was no multimedia, there was no colors, there was no GUI, the computers were not user friendly, and therefore people were afraid of using computers. There were only 2 places that people used to remove their chappals outside, or shoes. One is the computer room, another was temple. But in both the places they did not know what was happening inside and how decisions were made. It was much safer to just remove chappals and shoes and just go inside. Of course, for computer rooms, there was another issue of not letting the dust come inside the room and so on. But very few companies used computers in those days. It was a matter of a show, a matter of pride that you have a computer, but very few people used it as such. Okay, there were batch processing, so you got results after the event had taken place. Today there is online and real-time processing. When you reserve a seat, the next moment somebody comes and reserves the same, tries to reserve the same seat, you can't reserve it because it's already reserved. It's online real-time processing. At that time, when you wanted to do anything, you first had to punch cards, then feed to the computer would print out a listing, you had to check whether the punch data was correct or not, correct the data, feed the corrected data, and then take out the reports, and then start analyzing them. It actually used to take far longer than the real event had taken place. So very few people used computers as such. I was in IBM at that time, and I still remember we used to go to businesses and request them to give us, as IT departments, we request them to give us some business. Our USP was, please give us some work to do. We will imitate what you do on computers. We will mimic what you do on computers. So the maximum we could do was essentially whatever you do on computer, the process that we follow. You know what a business process is? Any business process, preparing a payroll is a business process, purchasing is a business process, and so on and so forth. So essentially any process that the way you do manually, I'll automate it. Essentially, instead of doing it manually, I will do it on computers. That was only USP. That was the only point that information technology would make to businesses. That I'll just do exactly what you do on computers, automate it. Then came mainframes, mini computers in the 1970s. The prices fell, the costs fell, the power increased. But even then, computers did not become very popular. Databases had started emerging. DEC, DG, Prime, WAN, many mini computers arose. They started getting connected. However, the popularity of computers had started increasing, but they still had not sort of assumed the kind of popularity that you saw in 1980s. The reason why in 1980s computers started becoming very popular was simple. Personal computers came into existence, and the greatest thing that happened in the decade of 1980s was that PCs became commonplace. You would see PCs on almost every desk of the officers, managers. You could see PCs in the houses, on the tables of doctors, on lawyers, and so on and so forth. Not immediately, but as the years passed by, in the decade of 1980s, you see personal computers, because the price fell, the size fell, the power increased, PCs, very small PCs started becoming more powerful than your mainframes and so on. And more importantly, they became user-friendly, there was GUI, there were colors, there was multimedia. And it's because of this users started believing in computerization. They started, approaching computerization and information technology from a very different perspective and angle. When earlier they were very negative about it, nobody used to pay attention to the IT department. Even if IT department used to beg for work from businesses, businesses knew that if at all computers produce reports, they produce reports late. In the first place, they were not even, you couldn't be sure, we had to check data, whether it was right, wrong, and so on. And they were not user-friendly, so people used to oppose computerization. Because now users started embracing computerization, and that gave rise to enormous amount of applications which they had not even thought about until that time. A number of applications started springing up during the decade of 1980s, and computers spread to almost all walks of life. They assumed an important place in businesses. They became central to businesses rather than peripheral. And this is the first time that information technology started telling businesses that I will no longer imitate you, I will no longer follow you, I will no longer mimic you, no longer just automate the way you do things manually, but I will now show you how you can do your own business, the same business, far, far more efficiently, many, many folds efficiently. Throw away the old process, obliterate the old process, and with the help of computers and networks, build entirely new process which will change your efficiency not by incrementally by 5%, but will improve your efficiency multifold, by many times over. That was the selling point of information technology in 1980s. This was called, in management parlance, the business process re-engineering. And those of MBA students, I'm sure there are a few, must have read about BPR. Business process re-engineering does not talk about incremental changes. Business process re-engineering talks about revolutionary changes. In fact, there's a book called Re-Engineering the Corporation, which talks about obliterate the old process. I'll give you 3-4 examples to illustrate what I'm trying to say. Take ATMs in bank. Before ATMs, how did you used to withdraw cash or deposit cash? You used to go to the bank, then take a token, then wait for your turn to come, and then there was a bell, ting ting, then you used to go to the counter and then tell a clerk just to dispense the cash. With ATMs, the process was not changed by 5-10%. The old process was obliterated, completely removed. And the new process, which had no resemblance with the old process at all, a completely new process was put in place, increasing the efficiency many, many folds. It obviously put a question mark about what should the teller clerk do, and create a question about obsolescence. And I'll return to this theme towards the end of my talk as to the kind of obsolescence that the society is going to experience and has to face and tackle in our future life, and you all will have to do that also. And I'll come to that point, because it's a very important point for us to remember if we want to succeed in tomorrow's world. I think the rate of obsolescence started changing as the new technology started invading just about every walk of life. Take another example. Take e-banking also is another example. Take CAD-CAM. Earlier, before CAD-CAM, people used to, the draftsman used to take a T-square and draw the machine drawings. Now, with CAD-CAM, all that changed. When I was in IIT, we had a machine drawing as a subject. We had to take a T-square and actually draw, plan, elevation, and so on, do a lot of machine drawings. Of course, we didn't do it. Somebody else had done it 10 years back when we used to do glass topo, etc. That's another story. But essentially, somebody had to do it. Today, with CAD-CAM, the entire process of design has changed. Not only can you now add finite element analysis and a number of other things which it was very difficult and hard to do manually. which you can do now on computers. But with CAD/CAM, you can design a product, you can change it, you can test it, you can transmit it to all the locations that you want to, in order to maintain the uniformity. Because in manufacturing, as I'm sure Dr. Saab will agree, it's extremely difficult to maintain the uniformity in production and quality control and variety of things. Imagine the plant of Boeing, or imagine a very large company where the final product is made of several bins of materials, each one having several sub-assemblies, each one again various sub-assemblies and then components and finally parts at various levels. There are 20, 30, 50 levels, and at each there are dozens of hundreds of components, sub-assemblies and so on. You can imagine the kind of mess that can arise, because for each part, either you make or buy. You make within a company or buy from outside. And there are several suppliers who are knocking on your door each month to tell you that now we have this product using this material, this is better, so why don't you use it, and so on. So you have to maintain several versions of a product, which one to be used in which model, and hundreds of things. Manually to do this in a company like Boeing or any other complex product company was horrendous. I mean, it's unthinkable today for any large manufacturing company not to use CAD. If you were to go back to old drafting, draftsmen having to draw with using T-square, it will be horrendous and impossible. So the entire process was changed, not incrementally, but dramatically. I'll give you another example, or DTP for that matter. The old DTP was changed, and with DTP today, or word processing, the entire publishing, ask any publishing industry not to use computers today, it's impossible. Ask newspapers, it's impossible to print or publish a newspaper without DTP today. And the in-betweening software, it was called in-betweening many years back. Now, of course, there are multiple versions of software. The in-betweening software started telling you that give me a picture of the cat at one end of the wall, give me the picture of the cat at the other end of the wall, and that is the software, using graphics and mathematics and of rotation and stuff like that, will draw all these intermediate pictures by software itself. You don't have to employ artists to draw these pictures. So software started drawing all these pictures, putting them on a reel, and then started showing them to you on a screen at whatever speed you want the pictures to be shown. So it will just give it as a parameter, 10, 20, 30, so it will show the pictures at a speed. And all the artists were jobless, again the obsolescence. The continuous change, and that is going to force people to learn very, very fast. I'll come to that thing towards the end. So I think the important thing that happened in the 1980s was that information technology started driving a process which is called business process engineering, and thereby increasing the efficiency of businesses many folds, not incrementally by 5%. And therefore, if a company used information technology, it could make profits and be competitive. And if its competitor did not use information technology, it could lose out in the marketplace. It was as simple as that. And that caught the imagination of hundreds of companies in the United States. As you know, the United States is ahead of Europe and Japan in terms of accepting new, not just technologies, but new thinking and so on and so forth. It's called adventures. So in order to be profitable and be competitive in the marketplace, hundreds of American companies started thinking of using computers and developing applications. If they didn't, their competitors would get an edge and they would be thrown out of business. And this was as simple as that. Information technology was lagging behind and asking and requesting for some work to be done, suddenly became prominent, became central, started directing things to businesses in a way that if the businesses did not use information technology, they could not run the way they were expected. I think that changed the entire scenario. Where do you get programmers from? American businesses needed hundreds and thousands of programmers, because suddenly thousands of companies started developing applications. So the demand for programming in America increased in the 80s. And the rate at which the computer programmers at that time in America, the going rate at that time was around $80 to $100 per hour. Some programmers were $60 per hour, some 70, some 80, etc. per hour. This is the time that we Indian companies started thinking that why don't we send Indian programmers to America? It will be far cheaper for American companies to accept Indian programmers and get programming done through Indian programmers. I was in Patni at that time. Narayan Modi had just left Patni and started Infosys. I started sitting in the same chair and I ran Patni for 11 years after that. Patni, Infosys was much smaller than Patni at that time. We all used to think about it. Nandan was in fact 5 years junior to me in IIT. We used to meet and there were very few companies by the way. Very, very few companies in information technology. I mean TCS, Tata Burroughs in those days. There was Datamatics, there was Patni, and there was Infosys just started. Wipro had just sort of made a beginning. There were very few companies. TCS was of course the oldest, but there were extremely few companies in those days. And we all used to sort of think about America needs programmers, and we have good programmers. How do we make sure that we sort of tie these both ends? And we started going to America and making calls. We thought that if I start calling an American customer saying that you have to shell out $80 to $100 per hour for a programmer, here is an Indian company, including the airfare and including the hotel charges in America, including the Indian salary that we have to pay for their families to survive, and sundry expenses, and our profit, we can charge you $40 to $50 an hour. And the first thought in our mind was that there is a large difference between 70 and 50 or 80 and 50, and the American customer was a prospect at that time, would just jump up and then sort of receive us with great amount of admiration and embrace us. But that hardly happened. It took several months, and painstaking several months, excruciatingly painful several months of requesting, begging the American customers to accept Indian programmers on site. Whenever we used to call, the secretary used to come on the phone and used to say, send your brochure, So we used to send the brochure. Generally send the brochure means please don't call again. I mean, as simple as that. Now, American program managers, unless they come online and they talk and they show interest and give a meeting, nothing proceeds. And the brochure means that they get hundreds of brochures from many companies, Americans and otherwise, and therefore that essentially means that your brochure will sort of lie there amongst several others which may have come. So there was hardly any response. And the reason we learned later on, the reason why this skepticism was because the American channels and TV channels had created an impression about India which was extremely adverse. The likes of CNNs and CBSS and ABCs and so on had created an impression about India that India is full of serpents, elephants and magicians. And I remember when the prospect finally gave me, allowed me to talk on the phone and I could connect to the final decision maker instead of the secretary. And I had a presentation ready once, in fact in New York I gave a presentation. My first slide was, India is full of serpents, elephants, magicians, alright, but we also have good programmers. And the American customers are programmers. I mean, have you seen a computer at all in your life? I mean, how do you know programming? I mean, the image of India is some backward, completely sort of all the people moving around with age-old huts and that kind of stuff. So, like Shashi Kapoor says in the film Diwar, mere paas maa hai. So I told an American customer, we have IITs, So I thought, let's just get him, so that's fantastic, But he said, what is IIT? What is the long form IIT? And that was the end of the story. So I would tell him that we have some institute like IIT, it's supposed to be good and other kind of sell. Not just IIT, but several other institutes like yours and several other Indian colleges as well. I had to sell. We all had to sell. But the American customers used to look at us with complete disbelief. You won't imagine the kind of excruciating pain. Thanks to the image that American customers cherished about India, it was extremely adverse. And finally, after a lot of requests, one American customer agreed to have 2 of our people travel to America for a test trial of 15 days. If that doesn't work out, the American customer was to send these 2 guys back at our expense. And we took the risk. And I in fact chose the best 2 MTech computer science people in my company who were extremely bright, because I just didn't want to fail, and the cost of failure would have been horrendous. These guys were extremely bright, but I could train them in terms of how to behave in America. You can't even believe in America, what you say is not very important. How you say is far more important. Even if you talk rubbish, it's okay, but if you talk confidently, that's okay. That's fine. That's how they choose their presidents anyway. So basically, you have to. So I have to tell them that when you shake hands, the grip is very important. That in fact is a mark of confidence. Okay, the grip, there you eye-to-eye contact. You look into the eyes of a person that you're talking to, not somewhere else. And be firm, but be confident. The way you talk is speak is very important. So I have to train these guys. Especially girls. In those days, telling the girls that you would look into the eyes of a foreigner, oh my God, how can I do that? The Indian girls at that time, I had to literally train them. If you don't do this, it will be taken as mark of diffidence. Of course, now things have changed. Now I'm told that when an Indian girl goes and shakes hands with an American customer, Americans start looking the other way, But that's another story. I could tell them how to drive left hand side, right hand side, all kinds of things in America. Even speaking English for them, but I still remember there was a couple whom I told them that when you are in America, you must speak in English. And I had gone to Houston. I tried to go every month to meet my customers and the people that I had sent. And I had gone to Houston, and in Houston, I was invited for dinner by this couple. And when I started, I started having dinner, and both of them came. And normally we say eat properly, don't feel shy. In Marathi we say lazu naka, for those who understand Marathi. So they said, don't eat properly, don't feel shy. So these two both, they had to speak in English. I had instructed them to, and then they started saying, Mr. Godbole, eat shamelessly, eat shamelessly. I didn't understand. But I was extremely impressed with these guys because nobody had understood my nature so quickly. That's another story. So speaking English, speaking confidently, how you talk, how greeting the customer, holding the door. Because we have a habit, when you pass the door, just bang the door on somebody who's coming next. So hundreds of small things, including driving and so on. So I have to instruct them that those things are as important as your technology expertise. So these two people really went there finally. You won't believe that I had to put, like Oracle, I will give database and language, I don't remember. I had to put a manual of that software product in their hands. They had not even heard of that product, and they had to work on that product on Monday. On Friday night, they took a flight. For 2 days in the flight, and after going there, despite the jet lag, they had to read that manual. From Monday, they started working on that product. But they were really bright. And in 2 weeks' time, the customer called me and said, people are magic, send me 2 more people. And then 2 more people, and then 2 more people, and so on. The same experience was followed by Infosys, TCS, and most of the companies, and many other companies sprang up during that time. And during the period of the decade of 1980s, there were more than 100,000 people who went to America. Today, I'm just trying to sort of fast forward. A few months back, last year, I was in America. There was a CBS 60 program on CBS channel in America, which is very popular, but very prestigious as well. So the likes of the heads of MITs and Stanfords and Carnegie Mellons and so on had got together, and they all were almost with a boring, really respectfully, they all were admitting that IIT is one of the best universities in the world, and so are many Indian universities, such as yours. The important message was that because of 2 decades, and first 1980s decade of on-site, which was called disparagingly as the body shopping period, in a derogatory sense, and what followed in 1990s was offshore centers which flourished. The Indian software talent was proved beyond doubt, and therefore they realized that there is a huge amount of talent in India, and therefore that comment was made by the top boss. 2000 onwards, the allied industries of BPM call center and several other things really arose. Now, what's likely to happen in tomorrow's world? And I would like to sort of discuss that for the next 8 to 10 minutes. And the next 8 to 10 minutes, I'd like to discuss what we should do to succeed in tomorrow's world. I mean, that way I can talk for a long time, and there's not enough time. We have to also listen to a lot more in your subsequent lectures and topics. But I think I have to wind up in. There are 20 more minutes, I think. Yeah. So, what's likely to happen in tomorrow's world? How is it connected with information technology? That's what I would like to talk to you about. In tomorrow's world, there are 3 T's that will drive, as Abdul Kalam has always been saying: information technology, biotechnology, and nanotechnology. All the 3 T's will dominate in this century. Now, I maintain and I argue that all the other T's, BTs and NTs also will be driven by information technology. To give you an example, there was a project called Human Genome Project, which essentially was aiming at sequencing the genes. You know, we have around 100,000 genes, out of which around 40,000 are the most important. We need to understand the sequence of the genes. When we read our lives, essentially the genetic program is executing. It's only at a certain time the child starts crawling. It's only at a certain time the child starts standing up. The child starts speaking, for instance. Then at a certain time, then there are wrinkles on our face. Our hair turns grey. It's only at a certain time. It's as if there is a genetic program written in our body, in every cell, as we know, in DNA, and that is getting executed. To understand this genetic program or genetic sequence was essentially the aim of what it was called as the most ambitious program of Human Genome Project, which was headquartered at Washington, D.C. There were hundreds of scientists from all over the world which were struggling to understand the genetic sequence. It was supposed to end in the year 2003, but it ended in the year 2000. The reason why it ended in the year 2000 and it got over much earlier than the projected target date was essentially computer simulation. The reason I am saying this is, whether it is nanotechnology or bioinformatics or biotechnology or genetic engineering, I think information technology is going to play a significantly important role. What's likely to happen in tomorrow's world, I would like to discuss. This itself, in fact, forms a part of my lecture for an hour and a half. But I will compress that in 5 to 7 minutes for you, just to get a taste. Now let me just tell you, what I am now saying is not science fiction. What I am going to say almost will sound as if I am talking about something imaginary and is not likely to happen. It's almost approaching the borderline of science fiction, but it isn't. It is not. It is almost definitely likely to happen. When it will happen, I don't know. Whether after 5 years or 50, I don't know. I can't predict. When it will become commonplace, I don't know. Because any technology, for it to evolve and to get established and become commonplace and become affordable, there is always a lag. Like now, flying car has been unveiled, but by the time you see flying cars all over, it's going to take time. The video phone, the phone that we can see somebody while talking, actually was, developed by AT&T in 1968. Now we have started using it. You can see while talking. We normally use it for talking to our relatives in America and all that. But essentially, the idea evolved 4 decades back. Even the cell phone, the idea was started in 1940s. You may not believe. 50s and 60s. I have a whole history of. My next book on telecommunication history, which is a 500 pages book, it traces the entire history of the cell phone, with the beginning of which was made in as early as 1940s and 50s. So the time that a technology is starts to sort of get or develops and starts to get accepted and become commonplace, is always a gap. That gap is reducing as time passes, by the way, but there still will be a gap. So what I am going to speak about is something that is likely to happen from technological perspective. It's possible that it will happen, but when it will become commonplace and will be accepted, and you will see that sort of happening all around, that gap I can't predict. That's what I was trying to say. But things will almost definitely happen. So let me just begin. Point number 1: there will be no notes, no checkbooks, no credit cards, no coins, no debit cards. No more of money will exist. See, there is one thing that you must remember about technology and mankind, that unfortunately if something can happen, something actually does happen. You know, mankind has never said, oh, atomic bomb can exist, but let's not make it. Chemical weapons can exist, but let's not make it. You know, or any means of killing each other in a very bad and painful way. You know, I can't do it, but let's not make it. If something can happen, something actually does happen. I'm not saying therefore all that I'm going to say is going to be sinister and going to be bad necessarily, but I mean, if something can happen, I guess it will happen, regardless of its consequences, good or bad. When it will happen, I can't. But first example, for instance, no more money exists because after mainframes and mini computers and microcomputers and desktops and laptops and palm tops and desktop now, I'm sure you've seen pictures of desktops, ultimately a mobile phone is a computer. With technological convergence, all the television, mobile and TV are all coming together. On this larger mobile screen, you can see a TV. You can, you know, I used to joke about on mobile phones, by the way, you can see a TV, you can send SMSs, you can also see pictures, you can, you know, store data, you can store phone numbers, you can, you know, take photographs, and by the way, you can also talk. That's what I used to say. So mobile phones, which actually started essentially for talking, can do almost everything else, also talking sometimes. So basically, all with the technological convergence, right, a mobile phone can act as a computer, and all your bank balance can be stored in zeros and ones on a mobile phone's memory. So when you go to a shop and say, that is a shirt I will buy, what is the price? Shop tells you 800 rupees. I say, what is it? Okay, I like it, pack it. What is your account number? Doctor says so and so. You type your account number and type 800, so your amount will be decreased, which is debited, and the shopkeeper's amount, bank balance will be increased, which is in accounting terms credited, instantaneously. Somebody can argue, what about virus and what about security concerns? I mean, security concerns haven't stopped us from using e-banking and hundreds of other products by the way. There are always the choice by game. There was a DES code that was broken, there's an RSA code, now RSA code is broken, then that will continue. For those who learn security, I have a full chapter on security in my operating system, look, entire history and also algorithms of how security are. But you see, the point is that choice by game will continue. That will not stop us from using it. That's the most important. Schools and colleges which completely change their character, and they will not exist in the way they do today. Most of them actually will wither away. Because quite a few experiments can be simulated. Today, of course, in a class in India, there are 100, 120 students. So, you know, sort of putting them in 120 small boxes is very hard because you may not be able to recognize the faces. But if there were 20, 30 students in a class, you could actually project them on a screen. At the center, there's the teacher. Teacher asks a question. One student raises hands, and each student sitting at respective homes, each with a screen and with a camera. So teacher asks the questions, one student raises hands, teacher says, okay, give me an answer, and the student gives an answer, obviously wrongly. Teacher frowns, right, and scolds that student, the way she would in a normal class. All the other students also know and are listening to and seeing that the teacher has got upset and the student is being scolded, the same way that they can actually see in the real class. There is no reason for them to travel. All chemical and all the experiments can be simulated on a computer. You don't have to actually use burette pipettes and carry out hazardous experiments of pouring acids and stuff like that. No. You know, in our school there was a teacher who used to throw a duster if you gave a wrong answer. You know? That is a little difficult to sort of carry out in the internet age. But I'm told there was also research going on. I mean, you know, that if some student gives a wrong answer, the teacher will press a particular key, so there will be a small shock from behind for that student, you know. So I mean, you know, the innovation can always sort of take place to get over problems that you can. The point I'm trying to make, jokes apart, technologically there is no reason for even students to travel. The entire society will undergo a change. I get asked this question many times. What about social interaction? As if in Bombay local or even Pune, when people travel for hours together now, as if they are making social friends in their buses or trains. You know. On the contrary, and this is debatable, I'm not arguing for it or against it. Okay, it's my job to put forward what's likely to happen. I'm not taking sides, this is good or bad, but one argument could be that if This is going to save not just pollution, this, that, and so on, but this is going to save 3-4 hours of your daily travel. You can in fact now socialize more with people that you want to socialize with, not with people that you are forced to socialize with. If I am interested in philately, if I am interested in swimming, if I am interested in walking, mountaineering, music, literature, Ravi Shankar, hundreds of things, or spending time with family or picnics before, I have no time today. At 11 o'clock I am on a conference call. In fact, there is hardly any socialization today. So you will in fact get time to socialize. This could be another order. So think over. The point one is trying to say is whether good or bad is another aspect. I am not taking sides. But essentially I can see that happen in a few decades. If not today, maybe 3, 4, 5 decades. Then I am addressing all of you. Because I know whether I will be there or not, but in the next 30, 40, 50 years, you will witness all these changes. I am reasonably certain, because I don't see a reason why this wouldn't happen. And there are multiple things, with not just flying cars, but there are hundreds of things that will evolve. I mean, if the next step of generic engineering is if I can understand a generic sequence, then why can't I change it? The way I can change a Java program, and debug and change the Java program, I should be able to change the generic sequence. So that I won't develop wrinkles, I won't sort of develop the grey hair, and I won't age at all, for instance. Not just external appearances, but I would retain the same energy that I had when I was young. So, end of aging, I have several books on end of aging, and that research is serious research. It is not trivial research. The research is actually going on seriously. Sort of the cosmetic industry must be shivering right now, but if that happens, it's going to change the way we lead our lives. Maybe we will live for 200 years. We'll live for 70, 80 years, maybe we'll take a pill and drop dead for 20 years and again get up, then start looking at what are the new restaurants, what are the new friends, girlfriends, boyfriends. Then you start again eating, some different kind of food, go to different movies, enjoy different places. Then again take a pill and drop dead for 20 years and that kind of stuff. I mean, how the life will shape up, who knows? But there are several ramifications. In nanotechnology, for instance, nano-robots, small nano-robots are likely to sort of travel in our bloodstream all the time, and many of them, continuously monitoring each and every aspect of our health, urine and blood and sputum and several counts in our blood, heart rate and pulse and several things, every moment. There is a pathological lab in our body. If there is a problem, it will send an alarm to you. If there is a more serious problem, it will send a message to your doctor. And if there is a far more serious problem, then probably will send a message to the hospital and an ambulance simultaneously. I mean, this is again not trivial. There is a research, and there are companies, and there are researchers who are doing serious job, and there are also projectors to when it's likely to actually take place. Anyway, I won't go to what's like, but the important thing that I want to bring home or bring to your notice was very important. I think we must see all these changes that are happening will have a bearing on information technology. They will not happen apart from information technology, independent of obviously bioinformatics is much more than just IT programming or IT analysis and design or architecture. But without information technology, most of these advances are unthinkable. So what will information technology look like in years to come? What will you guys be doing in maybe next few decades? That's very important. How many years can you continue doing purchasing and inventory and SAP implementation and so on and so forth? How many years? It started many years back and will continue with this maybe 5, 10, 15, maybe 20 years. But by the time your career, you are in the thick of your career, 30 years, 20 years, you will be called upon to work on areas that you never thought you would. For instance, nanotechnology, high-end nanotechnology, bioinformatics, space travel maybe geoengineering, maybe different kinds of games, for instance. Unfortunately, maybe research on how to kill an opponent in a very painful way. Hundreds of things which will pop up. And that will give rise to different databases and languages. Please understand that every language or database has a purpose. In my life, I have worked with many languages. Not that I am an expert in many, but I have encountered many. Basic and COBOL and Basic and Fortran and COBOL and PL and Algol and C and C++, etc. Each one had a purpose. Basic had a purpose of education. C had a purpose of commerce or business. Sorry, COBOL had a purpose of commerce and business. C was portability. Fortran was mathematics. Ada was military. Java was internet. So each language was designed with a specific purpose. They didn't sort of arise out of thin air. Even the operating systems are different for different applications. There are embedded operating systems, there are real-time operating systems, and so on and so on. There are multimedia operating systems. So in tomorrow's world, when you're talking about the applications for going to Mars, for instance, or different geoengineering going to the center of Earth, for that matter, or high-end nanotechnology or bioinformatics, or you will encounter different databases, different languages, different kind of product. What will you do? So my first advice, and I'm not a great person to give advice, so I hate giving advice, so I didn't want to use that term, but a suggestion to succeed in tomorrow's world. And let me begin by saying, and I'll end in the next 5-6 minutes, but it's very important. I really would request you to listen to this very carefully. The important thing is, if you want to be a leader in tomorrow's world, please listen to this carefully. If you want to be a peripheral, also rank kind of fellow, it's not important that you follow this. You'll get a job somewhere, you'll be thrown out, and again get a job request, somehow survive. If that is what you want to do in your life, it's not necessary that you pay heed to, pay attention to what I'm saying. But if you want to be a leader driving things, you should, I guess you must, listen to what I'm saying very carefully. A, your technological foundation must be very, very sound. You must understand how computer architecture, operating systems, databases, project management, software engineering, languages, how they work, it must be clear in your mind. So that even if the instances change, if I may use the term of databases, even if Oracle gives way to some other database, even a language gives way to some other language, the philosophy of language and its construct, its compilation, its debugging, good programming practices is not going to change. If you understand how database works, even if Oracle gives way to some other database, the basics are not going to change. So if your basics are very sound, you can unlearn and learn very fast. Because I'll come back to the theme of things are going to change extremely rapidly. That's why I said I can list maybe 20 languages that even in my career I've gone through, not learned, but I've gone through, literally I have dealt with 20 languages. So they will come up, operating systems will come up, databases will come up. But you have to unlearn and learn because you'll be thrown into different applications all the time. You're not going to stick to one application. Those who will not unlearn and learn fast will be thrown out of work, or they will not at least retain their leadership position. You have to continuously learn. Right? Taylor blacks had to unlearn and learn. If they didn't learn new avenues, they couldn't find a job. Or the artists in California garage of Walt Disney had to learn something else. Or draftsmen for that matter, or typists, or most of the areas. A sociologist has said that each one will change jobs 6 times in one's lifetime. But changing jobs is not changing jobs from Wipro to Infosys, or State Bank to Bank of India. That's not changing job. Changing job means changing the nature of work, changing the way you do things. After 18 rows, the way you do things actually underwent a drastic change. That's what I mean by changing your job. When I was talking to a call center guy and said, you're going to change jobs 6 times, he said, what is so great in my career? I changed my jobs in 1 year, he said. But that is not changing a job, right? Changing a job is changing the nature of job. That's likely to happen far faster in years to come than it did in the last few decades. Because of the rate of obsolescence. That's why I started with the history of the universe. Whatever used to happen in tens of thousands of years, many times fold happened in a few centuries, and many times fold happened in a few decades. And now, the decades will become years, and years will become months. So I think that's the kind of pace with which rate of obsolescence will increase, and you will have to manage to cope with the changes. Point number 2, you will have to have excellent personality. And by personality, I mean, there are several things to personality. There is teamwork, there is communication. And in communication, I must say that in communication, I will emphasize English communication. Probably some of you know that I do write in Marathi these days, and I've said openly that in all future books I will write in Marathi only, because whatever I have collected, I have around 4,000 books from my personal library, collected from all over the world, and I think I really do want to contribute to Marathi knowledge and literature, whatever you may call, because it's my passion. But I think it's very important that you must have a great mastery on English language, not just sort of having to or being able to speak somehow. What we do is we think in Marathi or whichever vernacular language, we think in that language, we translate and then we speak. That is rubbish. You must be able to think in English. It's not just being able to sort of build good vocabulary. You should be fluent, you should be extremely elegant in your expressions, convincing, persuasive. You should be searching for words. You should be able to speak extempore, and it's extremely important that you do this. And why should you do this? Because most of our exports are with US, UK, Australia as far as IT is concerned. And if you want to be impressive, it's not just, if you just sort of speak English, somehow, what we call in Marathi is modka todka, you can just somehow survive and manage, but you won't sort of make it. I hate to give, anecdotes from my personal life, but I can't stop. When I in the first day of IIT on the best level, I am educated in Marathi medium also. I never in fact seen a building which is more than 3 stories when I came to IIT. On my first year, somebody luckily insulted me about my English communication. Started pointing out errors and mistakes and laughing at it and so on. And that really sort of, I can take any insult. Somebody says you're not good looking, so you don't have money, I don't mind that. Somebody speaks the truth, why should I mind it? But somebody says you can't do this. Then I just sort of get extremely upset about the intellectual insults, whatever. And then for the next 10 months I did nothing but English. Luckily in IIT those days we didn't have weekly exams, so I could manage to do this. But I studied etymology and phonetics and just about everything that is needed. It's not vocabulary, I would regard it as mother of words. It's the construction of sentences, the construction of how you express. I used to practice standing in front of a mirror, which came handy when I gave several seminars in New York, negotiated the deals on the World Trade Center. And so I think that the point I'm trying to make is communication is very important. Unfortunately, English, no language is better or worse, please understand. I am very proud of Marathi as well. But I think if you want to succeed in tomorrow's world, especially in information technology, in the exports of globalized world, it's necessary to have command over English. You must have teamwork. Today, without teamwork, you cannot succeed. Quite a few people ask me, why should you need a teamwork in R&D section? R&D is like sitting, with big beard and with sort of sitting alone and thinking about the universe or coming out with great ideas. Gone are those days. It was okay when Newton to sit below a tree and think of gravitation. Don't try doing that, nothing will happen. So even today research, even in cosmology, as sort of abstract a subject as cosmology or quantum physics, is collective, is a teamwork. I know several people in TIFR and Stanford and MIT, etc. My office used to be next door to MIT for 11 years, by the way. So every afternoon I used to go to MIT and meet several of my friends, ex-IIT, and also several Nobel laureates I used to meet in lift and so on. So the point is, even in cosmology or Big Bang or steady state, whichever sector you belong to, there's a teamwork. People build on each other's research. Even in pharmaceuticals, if you want to come up with a molecule, it's directed research. There's a budget, there's a team, and you're supposed to come up with the molecule by this date. There's a teamwork. You're supposed to cooperate in a structured fashion. So teamwork is very important. In fact, I always say there's a great amount of teamwork with parents and teachers in one way. Because both of them kill the curiosity and entrepreneurship in the children. There's a great amount of teamwork. They always instill a fear of failure. What will happen if you fail? I can understand that coming from families who find it very difficult to make both ends meet. It's very understandable. But if they're poor families, it will be hard for them to sort of But for families who are wealthy, I would much rather have these families tell their children, please try. If you fail, try again. If you fail, try again. Maybe 9 times you will fail, but 10th time you will succeed. I will support you to the hilt. Because I can. That's what I would like to hear from at least well-to-do parents, but they don't. Because they decide the future and they decide dreams for their children. And they limit these dreams to 1 BHK, 2 BHK, 3 BHK, to this car, be engineer or doctor, then give GRE, then go to America, B1, H1, you know, that kind of rubbish. I mean, they don't never sort of put higher level of dreams in the eyes of, in the minds of people. So basically, fear of failure, and therefore they kill entrepreneurship. But teamwork is extremely essential. Then your ego, you need to be understanding of your colleagues. If you are egoistic, if your sense of humor is very poor, you don't understand people, you don't mix with people, however good technologically you are not likely to succeed. So personality overall is extremely, extremely important. The next is entrepreneurship. As I have said, you need to be entrepreneurial. You don't need to necessarily look for jobs all the time, but kindle and sort of develop the entrepreneurial spirit in you. It's extremely important. In India, that's sort of not developed. There are a variety of reasons, economic and cultural. I won't go into that, but I think it's important to start instilling the spirit of entrepreneurship from the early ages. Last but not the least, I think it's very important that we all have gathered here because we come from a class where our parents could afford to pay for our education. But there is a majority of Indians today who can't afford to take their education. And as was said very aptly by by speakers before me, that whatever we do, we have to make sure the growth has to be inclusive. That unless the information technology, that we use information technology to make sure that it actually reaches out to most common and most needy people on the earth, I don't think we'll be doing justice to humanity, and I think we'll be only called as the most selfish people. So we won't be serving India or the world or the humanity in the best possible fashion. So I guess that these are the things I would leave as a matter of ponder with, and to think about if you want to succeed in tomorrow's world and make India proud. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I now request the chairperson of the function, Dr. Arun Ingle sir, Director IBMRD, to present the vote of thanks.
I will not take much of your time. Just hardly I know I can understand the situation of all the participants. But even though it's my responsibility and sincere duty towards the responsibility taken as the chairperson of the conference. As you know that this any conference, just rightly Dr. Achyut Godbole has said, is not possible unless and until you have a proper teamwork. And I am firmly believed in that concept that this outcome which we are observing today is a tremendous 24/7 work done by IBMRD team, teaching and non-teaching staff members. Because as you know that during the vote of thanks, we always try to consider so many things. I am 100% honest, whatever I am trying to do for the benefit of students community and researcher as such. But at the same time, I can understand, since from last 4.5 hours, everybody is waiting. But to make them aware you and to make a habitual to wait for more than 5 hours, it is also good skills which will help you to develop in coming future. By sitting in the office for 8 hours, it's not that much easy task. And only sitting in the conference for 5 hours also, it's very difficult task. But I hope that people will digest my ideas, and for coming 2 days, they will help me to reach up to the level of all researchers' expectations by considering the time constraint is concerned. I am very much thankful for today's all eminent guests, Honorable Balasaheb V.K. Patil sir, Honorable Dr. Y.K. Alap sir, Namda Radhakrishnan V.K. Patil sir, our CEO, who is always helping us, Dr. Sujay V.K. Patil, today's guest, Dr. Mangesh Bhuke, and of course my international friend, Dr. Robert Kokai, Dr. Kolte sir, President Sopami, Dr. Khedkar sir, Mami Presidents, Dr. Shirode sir, and Dr. Sharma, who they came from Udaipur. Being a chairman also, I have discussed with the management, but they are appreciated. Chairman is taking interest in academic, it's outstanding contributions, so we salute for that, sir. Thank you, sir, for coming. Of course, for doing day-to-day activities, I am being asked to look after these management activities, and Lieutenant General Dr. Sadananda is always with us, Dr. Daikawar sir is always with us, and this hall which has been provided by Dr. Abhijit Divte and principal of this nursing college, because this is a foundation groups. Under this we have been introduced that more than 10 institutions and various infrastructures we are sharing, but it's my duty to thank the support which is given by nursing principal, Kulkarni sir, all the teaching and non-teaching staff members who have been shared their 24/7 works for the development of this activity. I am thankful for them. At the same time, principals from various departments, HODs from various departments of all the institutes, those who have come across, and at the same time the participants coming from national and international level. I am really thankful for showing us trust that we can do something great which you need to be visualized and dreamed. At the same time, I am very much thankful to today's keynote speaker, Dr. Godbole sir. He has rightly said, unless and until there is a serious talk about this teamwork, nothing will happen. So once again salute the entire teamwork of IBMRD, which includes teaching, non-teaching staff members, technical supporting members. At the same time, we start from team to directors, even contract laborers of sweeper also. Unless and until I have support of each one of them, I will be a useless person. Rather, unless I have support of each one of them, I will be a great person which you will be appreciated in coming days. Thank you very much for your patience listening, and tomorrow we will see to it that we will not make you more waiting, and we will see to it that session will be handled as per the planning which has been given to the respective session chairman. Thank you.